in this congregation this day. It doesn't seem like there were members here. It doesn't seem like we're here that much other than on Wednesday night. But we do have a lot going on within our lives and doing the work that we do. In fact, this coming month and a half, we're just going to be everywhere, basically. I think next week we're supposed to be in Virginia, Minnesota, which is way up north, almost in Canada. The week after that, I think we're supposed to be here, but not on Sunday morning. I think we're supposed to be in Walika, I believe is where we're supposed to be that morning. And then the week after that, I'm in Monterrey, Mexico, and doing some work down there with the school, and they're having a leadership training session, and so we're down there, or I'm down there. Jody will be here. And then we go to Tennessee, and then we go to Kansas City, and then I go to Jamaica. And so anyway, we've got a pretty busy schedule ahead of us. But I'd rather, like I was telling Doyle, I'd rather be busy than sit around doing nothing, that's for sure. So, but anyway, do pray for us as we do our traveling and giving reports. I had fully intended to bring my iPad, which has my report on it, a PowerPoint on it, but in getting all the little kiddies out the door, I forgot my iPad. So I was taking quick notes of what I normally cover, and even though it won't be on the PowerPoint, we'll basically cover the same information. The Online Academy of Biblical Studies, and that's what we're going to be looking at, and that's actually the website there. The oabs.org is the website, and the Online Academy of Biblical Studies is actually the work of the Chipman Road Church in Lee's Summit, Missouri. And they oversee that work, and I'm in constant contact with them. They hear about, I don't know, I think it was in September of last year. You might remember this, I don't know. But we had actually been looking for a house in this area for quite a while, knowing that we were going to move here. And I put in my resignation to the elders of the Kansas Expressway Church. I think it was in September, maybe even August. And let them know that I was going to resign, and we were planning to resign Bible Institute, Missouri at the end of the second quarter, which ended somewhere around January the 15th. Well, OABS had been talking to me for a number of years. In fact, I think 8 years ago, they asked me to be the assistant director, and it just didn't work out at that particular time. And over the years, they have mentioned about going to work with them on a full-time basis, but it never worked out. And when they heard that I was resigning from the Bible Institute of Missouri, they asked me if I would consider being the director. Brother Ted Thrasher, who was the director, he has simply had some health issues that he could not continue that work, and so they needed somebody else, and they asked me to step in to take care of that. And I became the director of OABS at the beginning of January. And though there was a little bit of an overlap there, and really, quite frankly, a lot of working on both ends of the candle, but nonetheless, we were able to do that for a couple of weeks, and then, of course, that allowed me and Jody to move here and to be around our daughters and our grandchildren. One of the purposes that I have in giving a report is always to say thank you. I mean, we are so blessed in so many different ways, and I think about all the different things that God has used me in service, but quite frankly, I couldn't do what I do without help from others. I remember being in one location at one particular time. I was given a report of a different work, but this fella came up to me, big old tall fella. He really, quite frankly, got into my face, and he said, if you really believed in the work that you're doing, you'd do it for nothing. And I was kind of taken back by it. And I was really, I'm glad I didn't have a little television set that said what was on my mind, because I was thinking, well, that was the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. But there was and this fellow was a deacon, But there was another deacon standing there, and he said, well, how could he do that? If he worked full time, he wouldn't have time to do the work that he does. And that's really the amount of it. And so when I went to work with the Online Academy of Biblical Studies, it is a full-time work, and as you can see, I'm very involved in it. Not only did I preach this gospel meeting this past week, but also yesterday I taught 4 hours of classes. So, you know, it's a full-time work in and of itself. It's not the capacity that I was at BIM, but I was wanting to slow down a little bit. And so thankfully I'm able to do that, at least to some degree. But the purpose is really to say thank you. And this congregation has helped us in so many different ways in the past few years. I don't know how long this congregation has supported us on a monthly basis, but then also, I mean, I was quite overwhelmed with the gift that y'all are going to give me for the Jamaica work. And it was really quite taken back by the generosity that you all show. One of the passages that we use in schools of preaching and schools that are associated with the church is found in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. Now this particular passage, I've always found it interesting. If you didn't know, the book of 2 Timothy is the last book that Paul penned. In chapter 4, verse 8, or actually verse 6, he says, the time of my departure is at hand. I'm now ready to be offered. The time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight, I've finished my course, I've kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. Paul realized that he had come to the end of his life. Well, that's how I feel about life. I have less time to spend on earth than I have already spent, and I'm not wishing for myself a death sentence, and I don't feel like I've got one foot in the grave, but at the same time, I mean, reality has to kick in somewhere at some point, and I've spent more time on this earth than I've spent, past tense, more time than what I will spend in the future. Well, I'm concerned about the propagation of the gospel in the next generation. That's why schools exist. In 2 Timothy 2 and verse 2, Paul wrote, now keep in mind, the last book that he wrote. And he said, the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. Paul was concerned about the propagation of the gospel in the next generation. So he instructed Timothy to do just exactly what he had done. He had taught, and so he instructed Timothy, the things that you have heard of me, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Now, the way I usually outline that is heard, hand, hold. And so 3 simple H's there. The things that you have heard of me, hand down to the next generation with the hope that they'll teach others also. Now that's the theme of any faithful school of preaching. OABS is not simply a school of preaching, although we have trained preachers. We have 2 men that are our current teachers, or part of our current teachers, that were graduates of the school. We have other men that are preaching full-time, or at least preaching one is preaching part-time, one is preaching full-time, of the 2 that I'm thinking of. And so we have graduates of the school that are doing exactly that. OABS really goes a little further than just 2 Timothy 2 and verse 2, in that we're also teaching the gospel into the world. We're taking the gospel out into the world. We're not simply trying to train preachers, but we're trying to teach others to become Christians. And so anybody can be enrolled in the school as far as the OABS is concerned. And we have all kinds of different ones that are enrolled in the school. That some are non-Christians, some are Christians. I know of one lady that took some classes that actually graduated ultimately, that she is not a Christian, And never, we talked to her and talked to her and talked to her. She's clearly been taught the gospel. She never obeyed the gospel, but nonetheless, she ultimately finished all the courses and those kind of things. She obviously wasn't interested in obeying the gospel. Well, the Online Academy of Biblical Studies uses 21st century technology to teach the first century gospel. Now, you know, I remember reading the old debate books, and the old debate books would talk about authority, and the authority to go into all the world, and those kind of things usually was the example that they would use. And they would talk about the word go, and that there's implied authority in the word go. And what we mean by that is that we usually say it's generic authority, but there is some specific part of going into all the world. There's the specific part of it that says we can't just sit back and do nothing. We can't wait for people to come to us. We've got to take the gospel into the world. But Jesus doesn't tell us how to take the gospel into the world. It's left to our own expedient, or what we determine as the most expedient way to take the gospel into the world. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, those that debated this particular thing, and most debates will deal with authority, they would say, well, you can go by horse, you can go by foot, you can go by cart, you can go by train, you can go into all the world in those different ways. We got into the 20th century, we added, well, you can go by automobile, or you can go by jet airplane in the 20th century. Well, today, we can go in another way. We can go by the internet. And though the internet, we know that are used in a lot of different corrupt ways, but at the same time, it can be used to take the gospel into all the world. And that's what OABS does. We are dedicated to taking the gospel into all the world and to spread the good news of Jesus Christ into all the world. Now, any school basically has to have two things. It has to have instructors, and it has to have students. I mean, if you have only instructors and you don't have students, it's not a school. If you only have students and no instructors, it wouldn't be a school. So you have to have those two basic things. Now, there's really more to it than just that, but you have to have those two basic things. Now, as far as OABS is concerned, we obviously have instructors. We have 20-plus instructors. It depends on the time of the year and what's going on at that particular time and the different classes that we're offering at that particular time. But we have 20-plus instructors in the school in different places. We, of course, have 2 here in Oklahoma, Russ and I. We have, I don't know, several in Missouri. We have 1 in Kansas. We have 1 down in Tennessee. We have 1 in Georgia, 1 in Louisiana, and we have others besides that. But we have these, or no, we have 3 in Oklahoma. So we have all these instructors, and they're in different places, and the gospel then is spread through these instructors to multiple places. But it's done online. Now we have a software, and it's much like or much similar to any software you have with any college that offers online classes. And there are different windows in this software. Now, I've never seen the student side of it. I'll have to admit that. I don't have a reason to see the student side. And so all I see is the instructor side. But I understand the student side is very similar to that. But on the right side, I know who my students are within that class. And I can see that they're in class. And if they jump out of class or get knocked offline, I can see when they leave. I can see when they come. So I see who's in my class. I can also open up the audio for a student if I chose to do that. We don't normally do that. You can imagine what would go on. You have somebody taking over class or something of that nature. But I have authority to, if someone is being disruptive or whatever, I can kick them out of the class. Now, thankfully, I've never had to do that, but I know of other instructors that have had to do that. In the center of the software, there's a big window that I use it like a whiteboard, and I put outlines of the text that I'm using. I only teach textual classes as far as OABS is concerned, but I use it for outlines. You could use it for PowerPoints. I know that some instructors use it for PowerPoints. You could actually write on it if you wanted to do so. I have actually drawn on it. You remember the two olive trees that Zechariah talks about and those kind of things, and feeding different things. And so I've actually drawn that on there, some type of artistic sketch, although it's not really very artistic, but it's all at least drawn on there. On the right side, there is a window that has a chat room, and so students can chat to me. That's the way I prefer for them to speak to the instructor. They can type out a question, type out a statement. I usually, when I see that come up, I'll say so-and-so said this, so it'll be recorded in the audio as well. Now, there is also a little window where they can see me, and they see the video of the instructor. We have the capabilities of seeing the students, but we don't do that, and most students don't really want to be done that way. So they prefer only the audio that they themselves will broadcast, and some students don't even want to do that. All they want is the chat room. But that gives you an idea, at least some type of picture. And those students are in all these different localities, yet they can have access to the information that we're talking about. Now, as far as the instructors are concerned, every single instructor believes in the plenary inspiration of the Bible. And that simply means the verbal plenary, the inspiration is that every single word of the Bible is inspired of God. Every single instructor is a member of the church. Every single instructor is dedicated to the propagation of the gospel. Now think about it for a second. When does everybody have off? Well, everybody normally has Saturday off. Well, these instructors, they've got to dedicate an hour, 2 hours, most of them at least 2 hours, some of us as many as 4 hours. There's one instructor that was actually teaching more than that, but we cut them back down to 4 hours. There's no reason for one man to be overloaded more than that. But that's what they've dedicated on Saturday. Now, my classes are at 9 o'clock and at 10 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and we are supposed to be online about 30 minutes ahead of time, so that gives you an idea of the time frame that we're talking about. And so I'm talking about then from basically 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. That's kind of the time that I spend online on Saturday. And if I'm checking up on someone or doing something else, and obviously in between time, and normally I'm grading papers and things like that between those times. So it's a day that you take and you're working that day when everybody else is having off. That's the time when people have their family gatherings and things like that, which I think speak well of the instructors, that they're willing to dedicate that time to the gospel propagation. I think about Eldred Stevens. Eldred Stevens was a man he was an older gentleman when I was a young man, and he was the director of the school of preaching that I went to, the Preston Road School of Preaching in Dallas, Texas. And he said to his children, he said, you know, it's really not a bad thing for you to know that I'm dedicated to the gospel more than I love you. Because children need to learn that you love God more than you love them. And that the propagation of the gospel message is important and more important than family time. Well, that's how I think about these kind of things. I think he was wise in doing that, and I think I could say that about Jody. She would think the same thing, and I think our kids think in the same terms. that, there are things that are important. Family is important, don't get me wrong. But our kids need to know that other things are important too. And so a dedication to the gospel message and taking the gospel message into all the world is important. And our instructors are that way. Also, another thing that we can say about our instructors, there are some guys out there that are preachers, and anything that happens within the brotherhood, they're like a buzzard on a gut cart. I mean, they're on that thing instantly, and they're challenging this person and that person, and they just go from one controversy to another controversy. Our instructors are not that way. We defend the gospel. We stand up for what's true, but we're not extremists. It's more than just simply battling every single battle. I remember one time I mentioned this to one of those gospel preachers. I said, "You're always involved in these various controversies." And I was really talking about it in a negative way, and he said, "And I'm good at it." Well, is that really what we're all about? Well, I look at the life of Jesus, and yes, Jesus battled with people and he defended the truth, but was his life centered around such extremist views? I don't think so. I look at the Apostle Paul, the same thing. I don't see that their life was centered around such things like that. Yes, they defended the truth, but at the same time, they were loving and caring, and they were not extremists, and they tried to propagate the gospel. That's our instructors, and that's who we look for as instructors. As far as the students are concerned, I usually have a map of the United States, and then I bring up the next map that shows the number of states that we've had students in. Now, when I became the director, well, there's actually two of us that are directors, and I became the administrative director. One of the responsibilities that the elders asked me to do is to give reports of OABS. And so I started doing some research. I was curious how many places that we have taken the gospel into, and OABS has not kept really good records, but I went back 5 years. This is from 2014 to 2019, and we've gone into 30 states of the United States. Now, I sent that out to the instructors, and they said, "Well, I've had a student in this place or that place, and that's not on that map." And I said, "Well, it had to be before that 5 years, because in that 5-year period, we've had students, registered students, in 30 states of the United States." Then I looked at it from the standpoint of and I have all the states listed, but it's interesting, we've never had a student from Arizona, or at least during that 5 years, but it was just like a month after that there were 2 students from Arizona that were trying to enroll in class. So, it really goes further than that map shows. Then I looked at it from an international standpoint. We've gone into 31 nations. 31 nations, including the United States. Now, I thought it was interesting, 30 states and then 31 nations. I thought that was very interesting. But, we've gone into places like Vietnam and China, places that we've never even dreamed about going into. And so, it's a very effective way of getting out there. Now, when I talk about registered students, it doesn't mean they've finished any classes. We have a lot of students that take courses but never become a registered student also. But we have a lot of students that are registered students that you can imagine, if you have anything to do with education, freshman year, high, numbers, then by the time you get through half of the freshmen first semester, what happens to them? the number usually dwindles, and sometimes as much as 50%. And so then, and every year they dwindle down. And so we have the same exact thing, but we also have students who just are interested in taking 1 or 2 classes. We had one student who is a graduate and he preaches part-time. He spent 8 years in completing the courses. He decided that, well, his family time was important to him as well, and so he took all the morning classes for 4 years. The curriculum is 4 years long. He took all the morning classes for 4 years. Then he turned around and did all the afternoon classes for 4 years. So 8 years he spent with OABS and finally graduated from the school. But we also have students that never register. Now we've had very educated students and we've had some very uneducated students from all perspectives. We have a doctor that's actually, I think she's some type of a counselor type of a doctor out in the East Coast that's taking classes. We also had a pharmacist from Arkansas that is taking classes. But the guy from Arkansas, he teaches Bible classes on Sunday morning in the town that he lives in. And he's just interested in taking classes that he taught. And so whenever he taught a class, he would take the class on OABS to help prepare for it. But also think about a man, he contacted me and he never became a registered student. He was from Northern Ireland. And he simply asked for the outlines and the materials that I send out to students. And then I got to talking to him. Well, he's taken every single class. He was never a registered student. He said, y'all don't move fast enough for me. He wanted to take them in the evening, and so he took them every evening until he got them all finished. And I mean, we're talking about, I don't know how many hours total that would be, but that's a lot of hours that he completed. And I would say probably completed it in about a year and a half, maybe at the most, maybe 2 years. So our students really reach out quite a ways as far as that goes. As far as the curriculum goes, we teach every book of the Bible. I don't remember the number of credit hours that we use for the Old Testament, the number of credit hours for the New Testament. I just simply don't remember that. We also have topical classes, but we cover every book of the Bible. Now, I found that interesting that somehow the book of Lamentations was overlooked. Well, normally the book of Lamentations is taught at the same time as Jeremiah. But if you didn't know it, Jeremiah is the largest book, the prophetic book in the Old Testament. And even though it's not as many chapters as Isaiah 66 chapters, but when you take a word count, Jeremiah is actually larger than Isaiah. And in fact, it's actually larger in verse count too. But it's not as far as chapter is concerned. But there's a lot of chapters in Isaiah that are only 5, 6, 7 verses long. But he was teaching Jeremiah, and I said, you know, you're supposed to be covering Lamentations too. He said, well, I didn't know that. I thought they were putting that with Daniel. I said, well, no, this is the logical place to do it. I believe that Jeremiah was probably the writer of Lamentations. There is a little bit of debate with it, but the evidence, I think, clearly shows that it ought to be. And he said, well, thank you for letting me know. He said, it'll be part of it from now on. So we cover every single book of the Bible. No doubt about that. Plus, we have topical courses such as Introduction to the Bible. We have a course on the Godhead. We also have a course on the New Testament Church and other topical courses like that, like you would find in any preaching school. One of the unique things about OABS is that we really offer, or we are going to offer, it's going to change here a little bit, but we're going to offer 4 levels of education, 4 levels of instruction. I don't know about you, but the older I get, I need some time in the evening to relax. And so, you know, I get home, or actually I don't leave home usually, but when I get in the evening time, I'm ready to relax, and I turn the television on to relax a little bit, but quite frankly, there's very little on television to watch. And anybody that's concerned with morals know that there's little on television to watch. So what do? Well, you know, one of the things that you can do in this time, this era of time, most televisions have the ability to get on the internet. Why not watch the gospel meeting somewhere else? That's what OABS provides. Why not watch the lessons of a lectureship that's been archived or that's going on? I mean, we haven't done it last few weeks, but there for a while, almost every evening, we'd turn on the television, time to relax, and we'd tune in to a lectureship or a gospel meeting and broadcast that on our television set. And it was so much better for us than watching other things. And so that's the bottom level of it, of instruction. Then we have a Monday evening program that we're going to start. Now we do offer classes in the evenings, although I don't think we are offering in any in English this particular semester, but we have in the past offered some supplementary classes in the evenings. But we're getting ready to start a new curriculum. It's not going to be the same level of instruction as our Saturday school, but it'll be Monday evenings for 3 hours. It start at 7 o'clock. We'll have a New Testament church class. We'll have an Old Testament church or a New Testament class, an Old Testament class, and a topical study. Now, it won't necessarily be in that order, but we'll be offering those, and we have a planned curriculum that will take 5 years to complete, and we'll give a certificate of completion after those 5 years. It'll last for 15 weeks, and it'll be 3 hours on Monday night. But it will be broadcast and we're working at getting the instructors presently, and I've already got it cleared with the elders. We've already planned the curriculum. It's already, and we're just in the process of getting people to work out the plan. But it'll be broadcast in English, and it'll be broadcast the same curriculum in Spanish. Now, if you did not know it, if you add English and Spanish together, those are 2 of the 3 most commonly used languages of the world. 2 of the 3. Now, the most common used language is Mandarin Chinese. And I actually know 2 guys that speak fluent Mandarin Chinese. Actually, I know 3. And I'm going to be talking to them in the future, maybe about doing some Mandarin Chinese classes as well. But if you take Spanish as the 2nd most common language of the world, and English is the 3rd most common language of the world, we'll have a potential audience of about 1 billion people. 1 billion people. Now, to me, that's just absolutely overwhelming. And these classes will not be a deep study. There'll be an overview of different things, but it'll be just exactly what people of the world need. Now, that doesn't mean it's only going to be directed toward them. It's going to be also directed toward members of the church. And we already have at least 2 instructors that are in Spanish. I have others in mind, and hopefully we'll get that taken care of when I'm down there in Monterey. So that's our 2nd level of instruction. The 3rd level of instruction is our normal Saturday program that we have. Then we're going to start in the fall a 4th level of instruction, which will be even more in depth than what our other classes are. Since I've been working with preaching school since 1988, needless to say, I have a lot of notes and detailed notes on a lot of different books. And so I asked the elders if I could teach a class during the week, and it'll be a 2-hour class on Monday, 2 hours on Wednesday, 2 hours on Friday, with what I have in mind is new guys that are just graduated from school. Now I've known all these graduates from schools, and whether it's from Bible Institute of Missouri or wherever it's from, they get out there in the field and, they think to themselves, well, I just don't remember what Brother so-and-so said. I don't remember, and they need some additional instruction. That's what these classes really are intended to be directed at. I don't know how they'll go over, but I do know that some of our own graduates from the Bible Institute of Missouri are very clearly interested in these classes. And so that's who I'm trying to aim at as far as that fourth level and in-depth. It'll be actually 60 hours, 60 credit hours of course learning, which is the equivalent to what you would receive in a college. And so it'll be more in-depth than the others. Well, one of the things that people ask is, what can I do? Well, there's really a number of things that you could do. You could take classes, obviously, or watch archived classes online. That's obviously one of the things you could do. You could also pray for the work, pray for the instructors, pray for the students, pray for the school, pray for the oversight of the school. You can like us on Facebook. That's one of the ways that I'm trying to promote OABS is through Facebook, and our Facebook contacts have grown tremendously since we've started doing this. And Russ started that process, but I try to do something more than that. But think about it this way. If you like something on Facebook, and unless you have changed your settings and things like that, when you hit like on Facebook, everybody that you're friends with sees that. Now, if you share, even more will see it. And I suggest that people like them, like our post on Facebook, or share our post on Facebook. And think about it this way. Most of us have relatives that have never heard the gospel. And it just might be that when you like that and they see that they might think, well, I've been interested in this book or that book. I'm interested in studying the Bible in this area or that area. And it just might be that they'll pursue that. And then, after pursuing it, they might be taught the gospel. We teach the gospel. We teach what the Bible teaches. And so that might be a good way of teaching someone else. And of course, you could support it, the work as well. When I think about OABS and Jesus' message to take the gospel into all the world, I can't help but think that, the world's a mighty big place. 7 billion people. 7 billion people. And I don't know of any work in the Brotherhood that has a greater potential than OABS of reaching into all the world with the gospel message of Christ. And though I think about 30 nations that we've had registered students in, 30 nations or 31 nations, but I think about other nations that we've had students that weren't within that 5-year period. We're taking the gospel into all the world. And we're taking that gospel into places that could not go any other way. OABS has a potential that's almost unbelievable. But we can't do that without the help of congregations like this and getting the word out. Now, I'm a little bit of a realist. I realize that that's not for everybody. But if you're interested in the Word, if you're interested in studying, then check us out. It's simply oabs.org. And we offer a tremendous product that can save men's souls and can strengthen members of the church by the gospel message. I realize that the message that I've had this evening is really not about offering invitation, but at the same time we do want to offer the invitation. You see, God is interested in the salvation of men. He's interested in your salvation. But The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. That he wants us all to come to a knowledge of the truth in order to be saved. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 4. That God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved. God wants us to be saved. That's why we offer the invitation. So we offer that invitation this morning, or this evening rather, in case there's someone that needs to make things right. Again, I realize that our message wasn't